Hello hams, it's Don, KD2REU here. On today's episode, I'll be showing you some of the fun and inexpensive sightseeing opportunities that can be found within a short drive of Orlando. These are some of the many ways you can turn your HamCation trip into an extended vacation for a little more than the price of a few gallons of gas. Many of these places I simply stumbled upon on my way to larger attractions, but I'm glad I did because I love unique or vintage roadside attractions and interesting scenic stops that make any trip more memorable. So, here we go. I do have a few tips to share with you along the way. First off, if you're flying into Orlando and renting a car, be aware that the Central Florida Expressway Authority now has a program called Visitor Toll Pass. It lets you save money on tolls by issuing an electronic toll pass that hangs from your rearview mirror and automatically charges tolls to your credit or debit card. Many of the toll booths in the area are now automated, so it's not always possible to pay with cash. Be aware that rental car companies will offer you their own toll pass, but they'll charge you a premium, or a flat fee to use the pass even if you don't encounter any toll roads. The Visitor Toll Pass is free to use, and you only get charged a discounted toll rate. You can pick one up during business hours at a kiosk near the car rental area. It's best to reserve one in advance by going to www.visitortollpass.com. Well, my first stop wasn't really an attraction, for normal people anyway, but for a radio communication enthusiast, a giant communication tower is always worth a few pictures, especially if you can get this close to one. I arrived in Orlando a couple of days before the convention because a rocket launch was scheduled at Cape Canaveral that I wanted to see. I was hoping to watch it from the official NASA observation gantry, but that was already sold out long before I could make a reservation. So, I wanted to scope out the area for the best viewing locations ahead of time. More on that later. In the meantime, I drove by a sign along Route 50 on my way to the Space Coast that announced I was in Christmas, Florida. I've heard of the town and the post office that people used to get their Christmas cards postmarked from as a novelty, but I never knew there was an actual historic Fort Christmas with a year-round Christmas display. This is a fun little park. It used to have walking trails with additional scenes, gardens, and fountains. The trail's no longer maintained, but the remnants provide a glimpse into a time before the big theme parks ruled the tourism industry. Fort Christmas was actually a temporary military fort that was established on Christmas Day, 1837, during the Second Seminole War. It was abandoned in 1842, and the fort is now a ghost town of sorts. However, a replica of the fort was built and is maintained by the Florida Historical Society to demonstrate pioneer life in Central Florida. The Historical Society has an interesting podcast episode describing the history of the fort. There's a link to the full podcast in the video description.
Thousands of people from throughout Central Florida converge on the small town of Christmas every year to have the town's postmark appear on their Christmas cards. Although East Orlando keeps moving closer and closer, Christmas is still a rural community located in East Orange County, about halfway between Orlando and Titusville. Fort Christmas Historic Park features a collection of historic cracker houses from the late 1800s and early 1900s, cow camps, and a schoolhouse, but at the heart of the park is a replica of Fort Christmas, which was originally built during the Second Seminole Indian War. Vicki Pruitt is a recreation specialist at Fort Christmas Historic Park.
The war was mainly being fought because of people moving into the state and settling, and they were encroaching upon the land that Seminoles were using, so there would be skirmishes. There was also the slavery issue because the slaves would leave Georgia and hide out among the Seminole Indians, and so they were always having troops coming down or people coming down trying to recapture slaves.
The closest place to watch a rocket launch is from the official NASA observation gantry, but that usually costs about $60 per person, fills up fast, and is not guaranteed to even be available, depending on the type of launch it is. Fortunately, there are several other great options available. There's several waterfront parks in Titusville that are directly across the river from the launch site with impressive views. Kirk Point Park is the nicest park, with the most direct view, but it's also the smallest.
Six, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. And liftoff.
Heading south from Kirk Point Park and Highway 50, you can make your way to the Kennedy Space Center. There are usually special programs related to each launch that you can enjoy while you're touring the Space Center. Admission to the Space Center is a bit costly, especially considering you can spend a couple of days seeing everything. But there are things to see and photo opportunities outside the center, as well as an information center, souvenir shop, that are free to enter after you park your car. I decided not to purchase an admission to the Space Center that day because the launch I wanted to see had been rescheduled. They were even kind enough to refund my parking fee. Meanwhile, back north of Kirk Point Park and Highway 50, Spaceview Park is an older, classic launch view site that has a wonderful Project Mercury exhibit. Unfortunately, though, this park was badly damaged by a recent hurricane, and the waterfront is now closed. This must have been an amazing spot to gather for launches in the 1960s, 70s, and 80s, when space travel was still an exciting novelty. Parish Park is a public park near the entrance to the Canaveral National Seashore. The National Seashore is a great place to view a launch, but only if it's during normal park hours, which are pretty limited. Plus it costs about $20 to enter the seashore by car. Parish Park is free and has great views with a good amount of parking.
range officer that the range is green and ready to move forward.
The range is green. That is a big step moving forward. Everything's clear, basically mean there's no nothing to impede launch, nothing out there in the water, nothing out there in the air. T-minus 30 seconds as we count down to the liftoff of an Atlas V rocket.
25.
Status. Go Atlas. Go boost Centaur. Go Solar Orbiter.
There you heard the final status check for booster Centaur and spacecraft. Everything is good.
And so here we go. T-minus 10 seconds. 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. And liftoff of our solar orbit and international collaboration to give us new images and a better understanding of our life-giving star. Listening now, your full voice of Patrick Moore, ULA's launch commentator.
This launch in particular is meaningful to hams because what's being launched is a solar orbiter that will explore an orbit close to the sun to collect data that will in part provide us with much more information about the sunspot cycle. This may give us better and quicker ways to predict its impact on radio propagation here on Earth. There's a lot of nature and wildlife to see in rural Florida. Highway 50 between Orlando and Titusville has several vintage roadside attractions not far from Fort Christmas. There are airboat rides and alligator farms that are reminiscent of the attractions any Florida tourist would see decades ago before the big parks took over.
swampy world's largest gator. Largest alligator in the world.
There's even a nice park with lakes and fishing adjacent to the fairgrounds. The Forum Pavilion and RV campground at the HamCation event enjoy lakeside views of this lake. Be sure to check out my entire HamCation video series for full coverage of this radio event that happens in Orlando every February. If you want a fun dinner or some exciting nightlife, both Disney and Universal Studios have their own version of a free walk-through outdoor village with themed shops and restaurants. Be aware that Universal Studios currently charges $26 for parking before 6 p.m. Parking at Icon Park is always free, and there are fun rides and restaurants. My hotel was right across from the park, and I could see the giant wheel and swings from my room, so I had to check it out. Shadow Bay Park is a county park right in Orlando. I spent a couple of hours hiking trails and learning about how they're preserving the wildlife and natural scrub habitat of Mount Dora Ridge.
it. This is what's left of the Desert Inn Bar and Restaurant in Yeehaw, Junction, Florida. A couple months ago, a tractor trailer came barreling through this intersection and went right through the front of the building. And this was an historic landmark. I'm not sure if, I'm assuming they're going to tear it down. But there's the old gas pump. what's left of some rooms from the hotel. You can see a bed in there, chairs, window. Not sure we're going to be able to save it.
If seeing wildlife interests you, you'll find a large variety of exotic animals from all around the world at Arnold's Wildlife
What kind is she?
Rehabilitation,
She's a Florida panther.
including a beautiful butterfly garden.
Just a big cat.
Definitely. Toby and Toby, they're both in the rehabilitation program, so FWC took them 3 years. And Sue, the owner of the facility, she was raising up those 12 Florida Panthers in her house over there. Tom the turkey, he was a pet too. In our cattery, we have a couple of caracals and servals that are from out the house that were previously pets, and FWC compensated them from the owners.
It's a tortoise.
Yes, it's our potted tortoise.
You guys trying to show off?
Ours, they'll start laughing at you.
The Arnolds take in injured and unwanted animals, nurse them to health, and find new homes for them. While the animals are rehabilitating on the ranch, you can visit them for a $10 donation that directly helps support these animals.
What kind of birds are these? You're not a wild animal. What are you doing in there?
Even if you don't want to venture far from your hotel, there's a lot to do right in Orlando. If you stay anywhere near International Drive, a short walk around the block will reveal gems like the Pirates' Dinner Adventure. From the parking lot of my hotel, I could hear what sounded like a loud party or even something more sinister almost every night. On my last night in Orlando, I took an evening walk that revealed the source of these sounds. Apparently, it was the sounds of pirates attacking on the high seas every night during a live dinner theater enactment. How fun! As you leave Orlando to rest from your adventures, don't forget to return your toll pass at the airport.
Use the left 2 lanes to turn left onto the I-4 West ramp.
Don't leave it in your rental car. There are convenient drop boxes all over the airport. Hope to see you at one of the big radio conventions, and I hope you have a fun adventure or two while you're at it. Leave a comment below and let me know which adventure you like the most. Until next time, thanks for watching 73.